During parent-teacher night, my son introduced his stepdad as my real dad, and me as my mom's ex. I shook the teacher's hand and left quietly. That week, his braces payment bounced, and his summer camp got cancelled. My ex showed up crying. I've been divorced from Sarah for 3 years now, and we've shared custody of our 11-year-old son Marcus ever since. The arrangement was supposed to be straightforward. I pay child support, cover his medical expenses, and we split major decisions. Sarah remarried last year to some guy named Derek who works in insurance, and Marcus seemed to adjust well enough to having a stepdad around. Parent-teacher night was scheduled for Thursday evening at Marcus's middle school. Sarah and I had agreed months ago that I'd attend this one since she went to the last conference. I arrived at 7 sharp, found Mrs. Patterson's classroom, and waited in the hallway with the other parents. When my turn came, I walked in expecting the usual routine discussion about Marcus's grades and behavior. Mrs. Patterson smiled warmly and gestured to the small chair across from her desk. She launched into her prepared remarks about Marcus being a bright student who occasionally struggled with focus in math class. About 5 minutes in, she mentioned how nice it was to finally meet me, since she'd spoken with Derek several times already this year about Marcus's progress. I stopped her right there and asked what she meant. She looked confused and explained that Derek had been coming to school events, had signed Marcus up for the science fair, and had even attended the parent volunteer orientation. According to her communication log, Derek was listed as the primary contact for school matters and had been handling most correspondence with teachers. The pieces clicked together fast. I asked Mrs. Patterson to show me the school's contact information. And sure enough, Derek's name was listed as the main emergency contact, while I was marked as secondary. Sarah had apparently submitted updated contact forms at the beginning of the school year, making Derek the go-to person for all school communications without discussing it with me. Mrs. Patterson seemed genuinely uncomfortable as she realized something was wrong. She mentioned that just last week, Marcus had introduced Derek to his soccer coach as his real dad and referred to me as his mom's ex-boyfriend. She thought it was odd at the time, but assumed it was just kid confusion about family dynamics. I thanked Mrs. Patterson for her time, asked for copies of all the contact forms Sarah had submitted, and left the building. The drive home gave me time to process what had happened. Sarah hadn't just remarried. She was actively working to sideline me from Marcus's life and replace me with Derek. The school contact changes were just the tip of the iceberg. That night, I spent hours going through my files and making phone calls. I discovered that Sarah had also changed Marcus's emergency contacts at his doctor's office, updated his dental insurance to remove my notification preferences, gave me time to process what had happened, and had Derek listed as the authorized pickup person for the summer camp program I'd been paying for. She'd essentially been conducting a systematic campaign to make Derek the primary father figure. The next morning, I called my lawyer and scheduled an emergency meeting. I brought all the documentation I'd gathered, including the school contact forms and medical notification changes. My attorney confirmed what I already suspected. Sarah had violated multiple aspects of our custody agreement by making unilateral decisions about Marcus's welfare and actively undermining my parental involvement. We filed a motion for contempt of court that afternoon, but I decided to handle the immediate situation my own way. I called Marcus's orthodontist, and discovered that while I was still listed as the financial responsible party, Sarah had been bringing Derek to appointments, and presenting him as Marcus's stepfather, who helped with medical decisions. The next braces payment was scheduled to process on Monday, a $1,200 adjustment that would be declined when it hit my old account. I'd moved my banking around 6 months ago when Sarah kept accidentally overdrawing the joint account we'd maintained for Marcus expenses. I'd given her the new account information, but she'd apparently continued using the old routing numbers, assuming I'd just keep covering the difference when payments got returned. Monday morning brought the expected phone call. Sarah was frantic, explaining that Marcus's orthodontist had called about the declined payment and was threatening to suspend his treatment. She demanded to know why I'd sabotaged the payment, and I calmly explained that I'd closed the old account months ago due to unauthorized charges. She immediately started yelling about how I was being petty and hurting Marcus over adult problems. I let her vent for about 30 seconds before interrupting to ask why Derek hadn't covered the payment since he was apparently Marcus's primary father figure now. The line went quiet. I continued by mentioning that I'd also stopped the summer camp payment since Derek should probably handle that responsibility as well. Sarah's voice cracked as she asked what I was talking about. I explained that since she'd made Derek the primary contact for everything school-related, and had Marcus introducing him as his real father, it seemed logical that Derek should take over the financial responsibilities too. The camp cancellation hit hard because Marcus had been looking forward to it for months. It was a specialized STEM program that cost $3,000. And I'd paid the deposit back in February. The final payment was due this week, and without it, Marcus would lose his spot. Sarah begged me to reconsider, but I told her that Derek was welcome to cover the remaining balance if he wanted to take on that financial commitment. The immediate consequences were already piling up, though. Sarah had been calling daily, alternating between anger and desperation. Derek apparently wasn't as willing to step up financially as he'd been to play dad at school events. Marcus's orthodontist had put his treatment on hold after the payment was declined, and Sarah couldn't come up with the money to get it restarted. The summer camp spot had been filled by someone on the waiting list when the final payment didn't come through. Most importantly, Marcus was starting to ask questions about why things were changing. Sarah finally showed up at my apartment Thursday evening, looking exhausted and defeated. She'd been crying, her makeup was smeared, and her voice was hoarse. She asked if we could talk, and I invited her in, but made it clear that Derek wasn't welcome on my property. She sat on my couch and admitted that she'd made a mistake. The whole situation with changing Marcus's school contacts had been Derek's idea, she claimed. He'd convinced her that it would be more efficient if he handled school communications since he had more flexible work hours. She insisted she never meant for it to go as far as it had. I asked her directly why she'd allowed Marcus to introduce Derek as his real father. She broke down completely at that point, admitting that Derek had been pushing for a more traditional family structure, and had convinced her that Marcus would be better off with a stable father figure who was actually present in his daily life. The conversation went on for over an hour. Sarah explained that Derek had been increasingly controlling about her relationship with me, constantly questioning why she needed to coordinate with her ex-husband about anything. He'd made her feel like maintaining a co-parenting relationship was somehow disrespectful to their marriage. I listened to everything she had to say, then explained exactly how her actions had violated our custody agreement and damaged my relationship with Marcus. I made it clear that the financial support would continue only if she immediately corrected all the contact forms and restored my equal access to school and medical information. Update 2, 6 weeks later. Sarah had corrected most of the contact issues, but the damage to my relationship with Marcus was harder to fix. He'd been confused and hurt by the sudden changes to his summer plans and was old enough to understand that his parents were fighting again. The kid had been looking forward to that STEM camp since winter, and watching his disappointment was the hardest part of this whole situation. The contempt hearing went exactly as expected. The judge was not pleased with Sarah's unilateral changes to Marcus's school and medical contacts without consulting me. She received a formal reprimand and was ordered to pay my legal fees. More importantly, the custody agreement was modified to include specific language requiring both parents' consent for any changes to emergency contacts or communication preferences. Derek had apparently been less than supportive during the court proceedings. According to Sarah, he'd been angry about the legal fees and had started questioning whether he wanted to be involved in all this drama. The cracks in their marriage were becoming obvious even to Marcus, who mentioned that Derek had been staying late at work more often. The orthodontist situation resolved itself when Sarah's mother stepped in with a loan to cover the missed payment. Marcus's treatment resumed, but he'd lost about 6 weeks of progress. The summer camp spot was gone for good, which meant Marcus spent July doing day camps at the local recreation center instead of the program he'd been excited about. I'd started having longer conversations with Marcus about the situation, being careful not to badmouth his mother or Derek, but making sure he understood that I was still his father and wanted to be involved in his life. He admitted that Derek had been telling him that divorced dads usually moved on, and that it was better for everyone if stepdads took over the father role. Update 3. 4 months later. The real victory came when Marcus asked if he could spend more time at my place. Sarah's marriage to Derek was falling apart, and Marcus was caught in the middle of their arguments. Derek had apparently lost interest in playing daddy once he realized it came with actual responsibilities and financial obligations. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening, crying again, to tell me that Derek had moved out. He'd left after a fight about money, specifically about the ongoing costs of raising Marcus. According to Sarah, Derek had expected that I would continue paying for everything while he got to play the father role at school and social events. The conversation was different this time. Sarah seemed genuinely remorseful and admitted that she'd been wrong to let Derek interfere with my relationship with Marcus. She asked if we could work together to rebuild the co-parenting relationship we'd had before Derek entered the picture. I agreed to try, but made it clear that any future partners would need to respect the existing custody arrangement and my role as Marcus's father. Sarah promised that she'd learned her lesson about letting new relationships interfere with our son's stability. Marcus started spending more time at my apartment, and we began working on rebuilding our relationship. The damage from the past year wasn't going to heal overnight, but he seemed relieved to have clarity about his family situation again. He'd been walking on eggshells around Derek for months, trying to balance loyalty to his mom with his natural relationship with me. Final update, 8 months later. Sarah and Derek's divorce was finalized last month. The marriage had lasted barely 18 months. And Derek had shown his true colors by trying to avoid any financial responsibility for the chaos he'd helped create. He'd moved back to his home state and hadn't contacted Marcus since leaving. Marcus adjusted well to Derek's absence, which told me everything I needed to know about how genuine that relationship had been. Kids can sense when someone's interest in them is conditional, and Derek's quick exit confirmed that his feelings for Marcus had been more about impressing Sarah than about actually caring for her son. The custody arrangement was working better than ever. Sarah had learned to appreciate having a co-parent who was actually committed to Marcus' well-being, and I'd learned to be more vigilant about protecting my parental rights. We both grown from the experience even if it had been painful. Marcus's grades improved significantly once the family drama settled down. He made the honor roll for the first time in 2 years and joined the robotics club at school. The summer camp situation had been disappointing, but he'd found other activities that interested him just as much, including a weekend engineering program that was actually better suited to his interests. Looking back, I'm grateful that the situation forced us to address the problems in our co-parenting relationship. Sarah's attempt to sideline me had backfired completely. But it had also shown Marcus that I wasn't going anywhere and that our relationship was worth fighting for. The financial lessons weren't lost on Sarah either. She'd learned that finding someone willing to play house was very different from finding someone willing to take on the actual responsibilities of parenthood. Derek's quick retreat when money became an issue had been the wake-up call she needed. Today, Marcus and I have a stronger relationship than we've had since the divorce. He knows I'm his father and that I'll always be there for him, regardless of who else might come and go in his mother's life. That's worth more than any amount of child support or legal fees. If you enjoyed the story and want to hear more just like it, don't forget to like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts and subscribe for more stories. Your support helps these stories reach more people and trust me, the next one, it's even wilder.